Ladies and gentlemen, you were not born to impress anyone. Let that sit. The moment you came into this world, you were enough. Perfectly messy. Entirely yourself. And somewhere along the way, society told you, no, that's not good enough. So you put on masks. You changed your tone. You tamed your laughter. You rehearsed your emotions. But let me ask you this. If the world loves the mask you wear, but never sees your face, are you truly loved at all? This is why you must stay until the end of the speech. Because the cost of not being yourself is your happiness, your peace, and eventually, your identity. People often say, be yourself like it's easy. But they don't tell you that being yourself will make you misunderstood, judged, and even isolated. And yet it is the only way to experience true happiness. Because real joy isn't found in becoming something else. It is found in unbecoming everything you were told to be. You see, we are taught from childhood that we must earn approval through grades, through titles, through filters, through likes. We become excellent at playing roles. We become strangers to our own soul. But happiness isn't applause. It isn't attention. Happiness is the relief of finally returning home to yourself. Now let me tell you the paradox. The more you try to be accepted, the more you reject yourself. The more you reject yourself, the more you suffer. But the moment you stop pretending, the moment you allow yourself to be seen with all your flaws, quirks, and imperfections, that's when life starts to feel real. It's not always comfortable, but real. And real is where happiness lives. You don't have to be a polished version of yourself to be worthy of love. You just have to be. Be loud or quiet, be bold or reserved. Be complex, be contradictory, be confused, be healing. But be yourself, not a performance. Do you know why so many people are exhausted? Because they're carrying the weight of being someone they're not, every single day. And when you drop that weight, when you stop seeking to fit in, you'll begin to realize you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to be free. To be yourself fully is to walk into every room and not shrink. It is to speak your truth without apologizing. It is to know that your worth is not tied to how easily others digest you. You will be too much for some, too little for others. But for the right people, and most importantly, for you, you will finally be enough. So let this be the moment you stop abandoning yourself to be loved. Let this be the moment you choose peace over performance. Let this be the day you say, I am done hiding. Because happiness isn't out there. It is within you, waiting for you to come home. And it begins the moment you decide to be fully, unapologetically you. True happiness isn't something you find. It's something you uncover when masks are dropped. That statement might sound simple, almost poetic, but its truth runs deep. Most people live their entire lives chasing happiness like a destination on a map. They say, once I get that job, or once I meet the right person, or once I look a certain way, then they'll be happy. But happiness doesn't live at the top of a mountain you have to climb. It lives beneath the layers you've piled on to survive in this world. From childhood, we are taught to act a certain way to be accepted. We learn to smile when we're not happy. We learn to stay quiet when we want to speak. We learn to be agreeable even when we're hurting. These behaviors, repeated over time, become masks. And the more we wear them, the more disconnected we become from who we truly are. Eventually, we forget what our own face looks like beneath them. And this is where the misery begins. Because deep down, your soul knows when you're not being real. There's an uneasiness that builds, a quiet ache. You go through life feeling like something's missing, and you assume it must be love, success, or purpose. But what's truly missing is you, the real you, the raw, unfiltered, imperfect, but honest you. And no amount of external achievement can compensate for that internal absence. You can be admired, respected, even envied, but if you're doing all that from behind a mask, you'll still feel empty. That emptiness isn't failure. It's a signal. It's your soul asking, when will you let me breathe again? Because happiness can't coexist with pretense. It can't thrive in a space where you're constantly suppressing, editing, or disguising your truth to make others comfortable. People spend years in therapy, books, and spiritual practices trying to find happiness. But happiness isn't something you need to find. It's something you remember. It's what you felt before the world told you who to be. It's what existed before comparison, before rejection, before shame. It's still there, underneath the layers, quietly, waiting for you to return. The most liberating, most powerful experience you will ever have is the moment you start peeling off those masks. The moment you say, this is me, take it or leave it. Not out of arrogance, but out of peace. Because when you no longer need to prove yourself, when you stop trying to be everything for everyone, you begin to see how light life can feel. The pressure lifts, the fear loosens, and suddenly there's space. Space to feel, space to breathe, space to live. But let's be honest, removing the mask is terrifying. You've worn it for so long it feels like your skin. Without it you feel exposed, vulnerable, uncertain. That's normal. That fear is the final gatekeeper before freedom, because beyond that fear is something sacred, realness. And realness is magnetic. When you live as your true self, you don't just feel better, you attract better. You invite people into your life who love the unpolished version of you, not the character you are playing. You create relationships built on truth, not performance. You begin to walk through life with your shoulders relaxed and your heart open, and that is where happiness lives. Not in perfection, not in control, not in some future version of you, but here, now, in your authenticity. It doesn't require fixing. It requires remembering. Remember who you were before the world told you to be someone else. That's the key. That's the moment the search ended. Because what you were searching for was never out there. It was always waiting behind the mask. We are conditioned to perform, not to live. This simple truth reveals a deep flaw in the way we've been taught to exist. From the moment we enter this world, we are slowly introduced to a system that values image over essence, applause over authenticity, results over reality. As children, we are not simply encouraged to explore who we are. We are subtly trained to become who others want us to be. Sit still. Smile. Be polite. Don't be too loud. Don't cry. Don't make a mess. These seem like harmless instructions. But they teach us something far more dangerous, that our natural expressions are inconvenient, and that being accepted is more important than being real. And so the performance begins. We start measuring our words before we speak, tailoring our personalities to suit the room we're in. We exaggerate strengths, hide weaknesses, and often silence our deepest thoughts just to avoid judgment. School rewards us for fitting in, not for questioning. Workplaces promote efficiency, not humanity. Social media amplifies the pressure to appear flawless, to curate a version of ourselves that looks good, sounds good, and gets the most validation. It becomes less about who you are and more about how you are perceived. Life becomes a stage, and we become actors in our own existence. But here's the problem with performing. When your every move is scripted, your soul never gets to speak. You start to feel disconnected from your own life, like you're watching someone else live it. You show up to events, participate in conversations, post your highlights online, and still feel empty. Why? Because performance lacks presence. And without presence, you're not truly living. You're just existing on autopilot, hoping the applause will be loud enough to drown out the silence inside you. The tragic part is that many people don't even realize they're performing. They've worn the mask for so long that they've mistaken it for their face. But deep down, the quiet discomfort begins to grow, a feeling that something's off, that life feels hollow, even when it looks full, that success feels shallow, even when it appears impressive, that you're surrounded by people, yet still feel deeply alone. That discomfort isn't something to fear. It's your soul whispering, you weren't born for this act. You were born to feel, to connect, to be real. Living is messy. It's full of contradiction, vulnerability, and uncertainty. But that's what makes it beautiful. Real life doesn't come with filters. It comes with scars, awkward moments, raw laughter, and honest pain. You cannot access the joy of being alive if you're constantly performing a role, because joy requires honesty, and honesty doesn't come through scripts. It comes through presence, through being fully here in this moment as you are, not as you're supposed to be. And that's the shift. The moment you stop performing, you begin to live. You start listening more deeply, not to respond, but to understand. And slowly the pressure to be perfect begins to dissolve. It begins to dissolve. Not when you achieve more, not when you in perfect form, but now, right here, in your beautifully imperfect form. Yes, people may not understand you, some might walk away, but those who stay will see the real you. And that's worth everything, because being accepted for who you are is infinitely more fulfilling than being admired for a role you played. You will start to notice something magical. Life becomes richer, deeper, and more meaningful when you stop performing and start living. Conversations feel lighter, laughter feels truer, even the pain feels cleaner, less suffocating, because it's no longer hidden, it's no longer shameful. It just is. And that's okay. If you feel tired, ask yourself, am I tired from living, or am I exhausted from performing? If the answer is the latter, It's time to take off the mask. No more scripts. No more pretending. You don't need to. Perform your way into happiness. You need only to return to the living, breathing, feeling being you've always been beneath it all. That is where life begins again. And that is where true happiness resides. Freedom begins the moment you stop seeking approval and start embracing your raw essence. That's not just a motivational phrase. It's a profound turning point in your life. As long as you are chasing the validation of others, your sense of identity is built on a foundation that can be shaken at any moment. One wrong word, one look of disapproval, one failure to meet expectations, and suddenly your confidence crumbles. Why? Because it was never truly yours. It was borrowed from the outside world, fragile and conditional. We're taught early on that approval equals safety. If people approve of us, they won't hurt us, won't leave us, won't judge us, so we begin to tailor ourselves, our words, our choices, even our dreams, to fit what others expect. We become experts at reading the room, shaping ourselves to be liked. And we get applause for it, compliments, smiles, social acceptance. It feels like love, but it isn't, because real love, real self-worth, doesn't require you to shrink, filter, or compromise your truth. But here's the thing, living for approval is a prison disguised as comfort. It's a soft cage padded with praise, but locked by fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being alone. So you keep asking silently, am I okay now? Do you like me this way? Every time you adjust who you are to gain a nod or a like, you give away a little piece of your soul. And after years of this, you look in the mirror and no longer recognize who's staring back. You've become a collage of other people's preferences. The moment of freedom comes, not in rebellion, but in acceptance. When you decide to stop asking for permission to exist, when you begin to understand that your worth is not up for debate, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to be someone else's idea of good, successful, worthy, or lovable. You only need to be true. Your raw essence is not always tidy. It may be intense, emotional, quiet, loud, creative, wild, introverted. Whatever it is, it's yours. And owning it completely is what sets you free. No longer having to act, to please, to fit in. It's like taking a deep breath after years of holding it in. You finally get to rest in your own skin. That's freedom. Not running away from responsibilities, not escaping life, but simply standing in who you are without needing anyone to clap for it. And yes, not everyone will applaud your authenticity. Some people will be uncomfortable with your wholeness because it threatens the illusions they live by. But their discomfort is not your problem to fix. It's not your job to edit yourself for their peace. In fact, the more true you become, the more clearly you'll see who really sees you and who only loved your performance. When you stop seeking approval, you become powerful, not because you dominate, but because you no longer shrink. You begin to live from the inside out instead of the outside in. Your actions come from alignment, not obligation. Your voice gains weight because it's no longer trying to please. It's trying to express. You trust your own intuition more. You give yourself permission to say no, to walk away, to change, to grow. And ironically, that's when the right people start showing up. Not the ones who like your mask, but the ones who feel drawn to your energy, your truth, your essence. They don't want you to perform. They want you to be. In that kind of connection, built on truth instead of approval, is the most liberating kind of love there is. So if you feel like you're suffocating in your own life, ask yourself this: whose approval am I still chasing? And then ask, what part of myself have I been hiding to earn it? The moment you stop chasing that approval and start honoring what's real within you is the moment you unlock the door to your own freedom. No more masks, no more pretending, just you. That is where the joy is. That is where life begins. That is where you are finally free. Most people fear being themselves because they've been punished for it. Not always in direct, obvious ways, but in subtle, cutting forms that leave lasting scars. Maybe it was the moment a child spoke their mind and was told, "Don't say that." Maybe it was when they laughed too loud and got stared at, or when they cried in front of others and were mocked. Every time someone was honest and got rejected, every time they showed emotion and were told to toughen up, they learned a dangerous lesson. Being real isn't safe. What do? We adapt. We suppress parts of ourselves. We dim our light, control our tone, edit our personality. Slowly, unconsciously, we begin to filter everything we say and everything we feel. We create a version of ourselves that we think is more acceptable, more manageable, more palatable. Not because we want to be fake, but because we want to be loved. And we've been taught that love is conditional. And that's where the fear is born. Not the fear of others, but the fear of abandonment. Deep down, so many people believe, if I show you who I really am, you'll leave. Or worse, you'll laugh, you'll shame me, you'll use it against me. So they hold back. They keep their truths in their throat. They guard their emotions like secrets. They pretend to be okay when they're not. They smile through the ache. It's not just a habit. It's a defense mechanism, one that develops after years of tiny emotional wounds, often inflicted by the people closest to us. A parent who criticized instead of encouraged, a friend who mocks instead of listened, a society that rewards conformity and punishes originality. All of it teaches the same silent rule: fit in or suffer. And because of that, most people never really live as themselves. They play roles. They meet expectations. They try to be what others want, always hoping that if they perform well enough, someone will finally say, "I accept you." But the tragedy is that you can't feel truly accepted unless you're showing who you really are. And if the love you receive is based on a mask, it will never feel secure. It will never feel enough. This is why being yourself feels like a risk, because it is. It's the risk of not being liked, the risk of being misunderstood, the risk of losing relationships that were built on your silence. But what's the alternative? A life where you're loved for someone you're not? A life of quiet resentment and buried emotion? That's not safety. That's slow suffocation. Here's the truth. The punishment for being yourself isn't universal. Yes, some people will recoil from your honesty. Yes, some people will leave. But others will finally see you. Others will feel seen by you. Because your authenticity will give them permission to be real too. It will break the cycle of performance. It will create space for connection, not just interaction. You'll discover that there's a power in vulnerability that pretending could never give you. When you show up without armor, when you speak without a filter, when you live without apology, something shifts. You begin to feel free. Even if you're trembling, because the fear may still be there, but you're no longer obeying it. And slowly something even more important happens. You begin to trust yourself again. You stop second-guessing every emotion, every thought, every instinct. You stop measuring your worth based on how people respond to you. And instead, you start honoring the truth within you, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. Being yourself in a world that tries to punish authenticity is an act of quiet rebellion. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It simply refuses to hide anymore. It says, I will not abandon myself to be accepted. And that decision, however small, begins to change everything. You'll still feel fear sometimes. That's natural. But every time you choose honesty over performance, that fear loses its grip. And in its place, something more enduring begins to grow. Peace. The peace of living a life that feels like yours. The peace of knowing that the love you receive is real because it's loving you, not your mask. So yes, the fear of being yourself is real. But the cost of avoiding it is far greater. The longer you hide, the heavier life becomes. But the moment you stop hiding, that's when life begins to feel light, honest, and alive again. Happiness doesn't come from becoming someone else. It comes from unlearning who you're not. This truth is both liberating and challenging. We live in a world that constantly pushes the idea of self-improvement as self-replacement. We are bombarded with messages telling us who we should be. More successful, more attractive, more outgoing, more disciplined, more everything. The idea is that happiness lies just beyond the next version of ourselves. As if peace and joy are rewards waiting at the end of some personal makeover. But what if the real path to happiness isn't in adding more, but in subtracting what's false? What if you're not meant to become someone new, but to return to who you've always been, before the world told you otherwise? As children, we are free. We laugh without shame, cry without hesitation, speak without second-guessing. We are spontaneous, expressive, raw. But as we grow, we begin to internalize rules. Some spoken, some silently passed on. We learn what's acceptable, what's rewarded, what's seen as too much or not enough. Over time, we build layers on top of our core self. Layers made of other people's expectations, society's standards, and our own fears. These layers become a kind of identity. We begin to think that we are the roles we play, the labels we wear, the image we present. But deep down, there is often a quiet sense of disconnection, a feeling that something inside us has gone missing. That feeling isn't failure. It's not confusion. It's the call to come home to yourself. Unlearning who you're not means looking honestly at all the parts of your identity that were built on fear, survival, or social reward. Maybe you learn to be the strong one, who never asks for help. Maybe you became the people pleaser because you feared rejection. Maybe you crafted an image of success just to feel worthy. These roles might have protected you, even served you, but they're not you. They're strategies. And happiness doesn't live in strategy. It lives in authenticity. The work is not about destroying those parts, but about recognizing where they end and where you begin. It's about asking, do I truly believe this? Do I really want this? Does this reflect who I am or who I was told to be? When you begin to ask those questions, the unraveling begins. And in that unraveling, you start to uncover a quieter, deeper self. The self that isn't trying to impress, isn't trying to escape, isn't trying to be more than it is. That self already knows peace. That self is not chasing anything. It is simply being. And from that state of being, happiness flows effortlessly. Not the kind of happiness that spikes and crashes with external events, but the kind that hums steadily beneath everything else. A grounded joy, a gentle sense of enoughness. You know, unlearning who you're not also means releasing the pressure to fix yourself constantly. It's so easy to fall into the trap of endless self-improvement, thinking, once I solve this, I'll be happy. Once I get over that, I'll be whole. But the truth is, you are not a problem to be solved. You are a person to be understood. The more you understand yourself, the less you try to change yourself, and the more you begin to accept yourself. And that acceptance is where real happiness takes root. Doesn't mean you won't grow or evolve, of course you will. But growth from authenticity feels different than growth from shame. One expands you, the other exhausts you. One feels aligned, the other feels forced. When you stop trying to become someone else, you create space to remember who you've always been. You begin to reclaim the parts of yourself that were left behind. Your creativity, your curiosity, your voice, your softness, your wildness, your truth. And in that reclamation, life begins to feel richer, not because anything changed on the outside, but because you finally stopped fighting yourself on the inside. If you're tired of striving, of chasing, of feeling like you're never quite enough, it might be time to stop adding and start subtracting, to unlearn the noise, to peel away the layers, to meet yourself where you really are. Because happiness isn't waiting in some future version of you. It's buried beneath the false identities you've outgrown. And the more you let go of who you're not, the closer you come to the joy of simply being who you are. Being yourself fully means you're no longer at war with your mind, image, or past. It means you stop treating your own existence like a battlefield, where every flaw is an enemy, and every emotion must be controlled. Most people live with a quiet war inside them, battling thoughts they don't want to have, judging feelings that arise naturally, hiding parts of themselves they were taught to be ashamed of. But the truth is, you cannot feel peace until you stop fighting yourself. You've probably been taught to manage your image carefully, to show the strong parts, the polished parts, the acceptable parts. Maybe you've learned how to speak just the right way, behave just the right way, show just enough vulnerability to seem real, but never too much to make anyone uncomfortable. That's exhausting. It might bring you temporary acceptance, but it steals your long-term peace. Why? Because deep inside, There's always a voice wondering, if they knew the whole truth about me, my doubts, my wounds, my story, would they still stay? Being yourself fully is the decision to stop asking that question. It's the choice to stop trying to manage people's perception of you. It's saying, here I am, unpolished, unfinished, but whole. That choice isn't easy. It requires courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to feel discomfort. But what it gives in return is freedom. Freedom from the constant inner dialogue of self-doubt, comparison, and shame. A huge part of being at war with yourself is fighting your own mind. The thoughts that arise, self-criticism, fear, insecurity, are not signs of weakness. They are echoes of old experiences, of voices from the past. Trying to silence them completely only makes them louder. But learning to observe them without judgment changes everything. When you stop labeling every thought as good or bad, you stop fearing them. And when you stop fearing your mind, you begin to trust it. That trust is what quiets the chaos. Not control, but compassion. And then there's the image, the version of you that's been crafted to gain approval, admiration, or love. We all create images, consciously or unconsciously. But when you live for that image, when you measure your worth against it, you start to resent yourself every time you fall short. The image becomes a prison, and eventually the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be becomes unbearable. Being yourself fully means stepping away from the image. It means being okay with not always being on. It means letting people see the full spectrum of your humanity, your joy and your sadness, your strength and your softness. And yes, some people may walk away, but those who remain will see you, not a performance. And that kind of connection is the only one that truly matters. And what about the past? So many people are haunted by theirs, ashamed of mistakes, trapped by old versions of themselves, frozen by what once was. But your past is not a life sentence. It's a chapter. And it's only a weapon if you keep using it against yourself. When you are not being yourself fully, you often keep replaying those old memories, trying to rewrite them or hide them. But the past doesn't need to be erased for you to be free. It only needs to be integrated, understood, honored, and released. You are not your worst day. You are not your biggest failure. You are not the person you were when you didn't know better. And when you realize that, you stop running. You stop needing to prove that you've changed or healed or grown. You simply live from that truth. And that truth is enough. To be yourself fully is not to be perfect. It's to be complete. It's to welcome every part of your journey into the present, without apology. It's to look at your mind and say, I won't fight you anymore. To look at your reflection and say, I don't need to impress you. To look at your past and say, thank you for the lessons, but you don't define me. And when you reach that point, you'll feel it, not as a moment of fireworks, but as a quiet exhale, a deep sense of homecoming. That's when the war ends. That's when life begins. The world doesn't need a better version of you. It needs the real you, unfiltered. That truth can be difficult to accept in a society obsessed with constant improvement, polish, and presentation. We are encouraged to always be upgrading ourselves, to strive to be more impressive, more productive, more attractive, more refined. The message is loud and relentless. Who you are right now isn't quite enough. There's always something to fix, to edit, to enhance. But the quiet truth beneath all that noise is this. Realness is rare because it requires vulnerability. It's easy to present a version of yourself that others will applaud. It's easy to hide behind filters, achievements, rehearsed opinions, and carefully crafted smiles. What's hard is showing up as you are. Messy, uncertain, evolving. But that's exactly what the world needs. People who are present, not perfect. People who aren't afraid to be honest about who they are and how they feel. You might think the world wants your strengths. It might even seem like people are only drawn to your successes. But what they actually respond to most deeply is your truth, your imperfections, your courage to be honest, your willingness to show up without the script. That kind of authenticity doesn't just connect people, it frees them. When you are real, you give others silent permission to be real too. You were not born to be a product of trends, likes, or algorithms. You were born to be a soul in motion, a living truth in a world full of copies. When you try to become what the world praises most, you lose touch with what the world needs most. You, as you are. Not the edited version, not the performative version, just the one who wakes up every morning with a beating heart and a mind full of dreams and doubts. So many people chase the idea of bettering themselves without ever asking, better for whom? Better by whose standard? For what kind of approval? If bettering yourself means becoming someone you no longer recognize, then it's not growth, it's abandonment. There is nothing noble about denying your soul in pursuit of acceptance. Growth should never cost you your essence. The irony is, the more you try to be what others want, the more invisible you become. The more you shape yourself to meet expectations, the more you disappear beneath the mask. And yet, what makes you unforgettable is never your perfection, it's your presence, your energy, your rawness, the little things that make you you, the things that don't always make sense, that sometimes feel too big, too weird, too sensitive, too passionate. Those are not weaknesses. They are your signature. And the world doesn't need another polished act. It needs your signature. It's tempting to think you need to be more in order to be loved. But love, real love, whether from others or from yourself, can only find what's true. It can't connect to an illusion. It can't feel depth in a performance. Only when you drop the facade and speak, act, live from your core does life begin to respond to you in the way you've always longed for. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Some people won't understand your truth. Some will prefer the edited version, but that's okay. Because you're not here to be universally liked. You're here to live honestly, to express your truth fully, to stand in your story without shrinking. You are not a project to be perfected. You are a presence to be experienced. Stop withholding your essence just to make others comfortable. The world is already full of noise, of people pretending, of masks stacked on masks. What it's missing is the sound of real. And that sound begins with you. When you choose to show up, not as the version of you the world trained you to be, but as the one who existed before the world told you to change. So stop trying to be a better version of yourself just for show. Be the version that feels true, because your truth is your power. Your realness is your gift. And someone out there isn't waiting for your perfect self. They're waiting for your honest self, the one who doesn't apologize for existing exactly as they are. Living authentically is risky, but pretending forever is fatal. That's the unspoken truth most people sense but are too afraid to admit. Deep down, we all know that there's a price to being ourselves. It's not easy. The world isn't always kind to authenticity. When you show who you truly are, your unfiltered thoughts, your messy emotions, your unique perspective, you invite judgment. You risk misunderstanding, rejection, or even isolation. And so, most people decide it's safer to pretend. They put on a version of themselves that's easier to digest. Not too loud, not too quiet, not too emotional, not too blunt. Just enough to fit in, just enough to be accepted. It works for a while. Pretending offers temporary comfort. You feel safe, seen, even liked. But the problem is, it's not you that's being liked. It's the version of you that was shaped for others. And eventually, that realization begins to eat at you from the inside. You wake up one day and realize you don't recognize your own life. Your relationships feel hollow. Your accomplishments feel disconnected. You smile in photos and feel numb in your soul. Why? Because you've built a life around what you thought would make others happy, not what makes you whole. And the longer you wear the mask, the more suffocating it becomes. The more convincing your act is, the lonelier you feel. Because nobody knows you. Not really. That's where the fatal part comes in. Not in the literal sense, but in the spiritual sense. Something in you begins to decay when you keep pretending. Your joy shrinks. Your curiosity fades. Your voice grows quieter. The light in your eyes dims, not all at once, but gradually, until you're no longer living, you're performing. And the audience you're trying to impress, half of them aren't even paying attention. On the other hand, living authentically means risk. It means being seen in your fullness. It means saying things that might not land perfectly. It means making decisions others won't understand. It means walking away from places where you were tolerated but never truly valued. Yes, it's scary. Yes, you'll lose some people. But the ones who remain, they'll be real, they'll see you and stay. Not for what you give, but for who you are. Authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about honoring your feelings even when they're messy. It's about admitting you're still learning, still healing, still becoming. It's about letting your outside life match your inner world, even if it looks different from what others expect. And here's the paradox. While pretending might make life easier on the surface, authenticity makes life worth living. When you stop hiding, you breathe deeper. You laugh louder. You love with more presence. You begin to feel rooted in your own skin. And with time, your life starts to feel aligned. Not just successful, but meaningful. Of course, it won't be a smooth path. Being real means making peace with the fact that not everyone will like you. It means understanding that authenticity comes with consequences. You may be judged, you may be misunderstood, but you won't be lying to yourself anymore. And that freedom, that deep, unshakable peace is priceless. You have a choice. Pretend and keep the peace with others while waging war with yourself, or live honestly and finally make peace within, even if it costs you approval. And here's the truth that most people don't learn until it's too late. The greatest regret isn't being too real. Except that it's true. My name is Damod. This is FSS. This is editing hell tomorrow. Peace. Let today be the day you begin again. Drop the mask. Speak your truth. Honor your needs. Let your life reflect who you are, not who you're trying to be. Because pretending might protect you, but it will never fulfill you. And authenticity might shake things up, but it will ultimately save you. You were not born to be a shadow, you were born to shine. With all your colors, all your contradictions, all your depth. The world may not always reward your truth, but it will feel your truth. And more importantly, you will feel alive. And so, the journey back to happiness is not a journey forward into someone new, but a return back to who you truly are, beneath all the layers, the roles, the expectations. It's not about becoming more. It's about remembering the self that existed before the world told you to change, before fear silenced your voice, before shame made you small. Happiness, real and lasting, doesn't come from applause or perfection. It comes from living in alignment with your truth, your heart, your essence. It comes when you stop hiding, stop performing, and start allowing your raw, unfiltered self to breathe. Yes, it will cost you something. You might lose approval. You might shake foundations. But what you gain is worth far more: clarity, peace, authenticity, and the quiet joy of finally feeling whole. Because the most powerful life you can live is the one that feels like home to your soul. So be yourself, fully, boldly, unapologetically. That's where your freedom lives. That's where your happiness begins.